Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure and honor and distinguished honor for me to welcome you all to this informal working group on the Leadership Dialogue 3 for the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. First of all, I would like to express our appreciation to the co-host Kenya and Stockholm and Sweden for hosting this conference, and also to the co-chairs for Leadership Dialogue 3, Finland and Egypt. Today's discussion is expected to be very action-oriented. It is focused on accelerating the means of implementation, and that's what really the world needs if we are to achieve the SDGs, the climate neutrality, and the nature positive agenda to be achieved on time. So I will be moderating this discussion. My name is Asad Naqvi. I'm head of the Secretariat for Partnership for Action on Green Economy and Global and the Green Growth Knowledge Platform. To start with, I will like to lay out a few ground rules for engagement. And I would like to request my colleagues in the background to please put the slide on for the background, for the ground rules. So number one, we assume that the discussion will be informed by the background paper that many of you may have seen. It is available on the Stockholm Plus 50 website. Number two, we want this interaction to be fully interactive and fully inclusive. So we understand there are some people who are really good at making oral contributions, so you can take the floor and please raise your hands before you want to take the floor. We will unmute the mics. There is a technical team working behind us. And number two, that we also understand there are some people who are better at providing written comments. So you will see both the options available. In terms of taking the mic and taking the floor, the interventions will be limited to 2 minutes only. So at 1 minute and 30 seconds, you will hear a beep. And at 2 minutes, it's possible that the mic goes off. But you can still provide your written contributions through 3 channels. The first channel you will see is the chat channel, which will be very active. And all the chats are recorded and harvested and will feed into the outcome document that will be prepared based on the discussions today. Number two, you will be able to provide your detailed inputs through a Google form, and you will see a link to the Google form here, as well as the contact person in case you find any technical difficulties. I'm requesting my colleagues to please put the link of the Google form in the chat box, and this will be repeated a few times in case it goes up on the chat box. Number three, through the Green Forum, which is a platform of the Green Growth Knowledge Platform, we have created community spaces. These are internal community spaces where you can discuss ideas among yourselves and refine them between now and when the Stockholm Plus 50 conference actually happens. Now that's a closed community space, and I'm requesting my colleagues to put in the link for the Green Forum community space. There is a broader Stockholm Plus 50 community space, but there is a special space for each leadership dialogue, including the Leadership Dialogue 3. So, and you will have the email of a person who can help you in case there are technical issues. The idea is that we should be able to all provide our inputs, inform what comes out from Stockholm Plus 50, and stay focused on action. I think this is time to accelerate action. In addition to this, there are a couple of other things that I would like to highlight. Number one, please have your names very clearly written in front of your picture or in front of your blog, including your affiliation. It is important for the host and the co-host and co-chairs that we are able to capture your affiliations, which group of stakeholders you belong to. As I said, we want to make it fully inclusive. If you face a difficulty in changing your name, you can ask for technical help, but the easiest way is that if you find that your name is not correctly appearing on the screen or your affiliation is not there, for example, name of your country and your government, you can actually log out and with the same link, log back in, and that will give you an option to choose a name that you would like to display. And we will be there to help you with this one as well. There is also an issue of the digital divide that we would like to acknowledge and understand. And that's why the written comments are all welcome in any form. We had the discussion yesterday. In many parts of the world, the bandwidth has a lot of room to improve, and sometimes the audios are not clear. So that will be our effort, that we keep all channels open where you can provide inputs. Every input, every word that you write or you say is documented, is being recorded, and will inform the final document that is coming out. Now, with these ground rules, I would probably like to now go back to the main discussion. So we will have three main discussion areas today, and we will be starting with the sustainable finance or scaling up finance. We will be looking at two other areas of means of implementation, and there are three groups of discussion that will be under each of these areas. So please feel free when you would like that you prepare your mind for your inputs, and the discussion will be informed, as I said, by the background papers and also the opening remarks that the co-chairs will provide to set the scene. Before going into the substantive discussions, I would like to invite the co-host of this conference, which is Kenya and Sweden, to provide some welcome remarks for this session. And if I may start with Cecilia Varveken of Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and give the floor to her. So Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you, Assad, and a warm welcome to everyone that have joined this first informal working group meeting for Leadership Dialogue 3, focusing on accelerating the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development in the context of the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development. We are very happy to see that so many of you show interest in engaging, contributing to the success of Stockholm Plus 50. And also, of course, delighted and grateful that Egypt and Finland have agreed to take on the role as co-chairs for Leadership Dialogue 3 and will guide the work of the informal working groups leading up to Stockholm Plus 50. So 5 decades after the 1972 UN conference in Stockholm, and the way this conference placed environmental concerns, the linkages between environment and poverty at the forefront of the international agenda, Stockholm again will welcome the world in June this year. So following COP26, UNEA 5.2, and ahead of COP15 on biodiversity, COP27 on climate, we believe that Stockholm Plus 50 is a key moment to really reinforce the 1972 principles and also to provide a platform for the visions and actions that are formulated jointly by nations and stakeholders. And we believe that Stockholm Plus 50 offers a unique opportunity for a co-creation multi-stakeholder approach that engages all stakeholders in a transparent and inclusive manner. In June in Stockholm, we will connect, we will mobilize and accelerate for a sustainable future. Connect climate and environment action with development priorities and the well-being of present and future generations, leaving no one behind. We will mobilize key public and private stakeholders towards green and just transitions, showcasing solutions and the potential of transforming high-impact value chains. We will accelerate the implementation of commitments related to the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, the Emerging Global Biodiversity Framework, among others, generating new actions, raising ambition, and exploring innovative financing opportunities. So with that said, and against the background that we have a very broad mandate for Stockholm Plus 50, this, of course, comes with great opportunities, but also with some challenges. So I really encourage all of you to use this opportunity to prioritize, to really hone in on how Stockholm Plus 50 can make a difference related to the theme of Leadership Dialogue 3. I think only by focusing on a couple of key issues and actionable recommendations, we can make a real contribution to the means of implementation necessary to go from commitment to action, and to create an enabling environment to achieve concrete benefits and delivery on the ground. So I look forward to a fruitful discussion today that will help shape the content and priority areas of Leadership Dialogue 3. I thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. That was great. And may I now invite Dr. Ayub Macharia from Kenya to provide welcome remarks on behalf of the co-host Kenya, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Kenya is excited to be in this platform, and we also join Sweden in welcoming everybody to this discussion today on Leadership Dialogue 3. As you are aware that the world met for the first time in Stockholm in 1972, where the agenda was on environment. And much has happened since then. And many countries have gone ahead and signed several conventions on environment. And we have also made very many commitments on diverse aspects of the environment. Stockholm at 50 helps us to reflect on where we were those days and what has happened and our commitments and how we are contributing to making the planet a better place. And the three leadership dialogues that constitute Stockholm Plus 50 are very instrumental, and there will be a lot of expression of our perceptions, our knowledge, our experiences in implementing our commitments and our collaboration in making the world a better place. And what we seek is honest discussion on these matters so that we can have we can engage further beyond the 5 decades that we have been together. And so Kenya appreciates what is happening, and we would like to play an active role in getting to the next phase of our collaboration in taking care of our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cecilia and Dr. Ayub, for your welcome remarks. I think it's a great start, if I can use Cecilia's word, of concrete benefits for all. That's what we want to achieve probably through accelerated action. And Dr. Ayub, your words were very good, saying the making planet a better place for everyone, basically leaving no one behind. I would now like to invite the co-chairs for the Leadership Dialogue 3 to provide their welcome remarks. And it is His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Nasr, if I pronounce it correctly, sir, from Egypt. We will start with you, and then I will go to Annika Lindblom from Finland. So Ambassador Nasr, the mic and screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Asad, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here and together with our team here in Egypt from Foreign Affairs and Environment, facilitating the discussion on a very important topic, which is accelerating implementation. As was mentioned by the co-chairs, this is a very interesting year this year, where we are not only having interesting conventions, meetings, as we are having climate change towards the end of the year, we have biodiversity, and then we have the desertification. We also just finished the UNEA, and we had a celebration in UNEA at 50, which was a major outcome, and I would say one of the legacies of Stockholm 50 years ago. So while having all of this science related, together with the Ipcc report coming out, we already saw the adaptation part of the AR6 of the Ipcc. All of them are telling us that we are not on track in dealing with our environmental challenges. We are even way behind and lagging behind and facing an existential threat, if I would say, both in climate change, in biodiversity, in desertification. But still, there are a lot of beacons of hope. We just saw the agreement on starting to work on plastics. A lot of work is being done under UNEP and on chemicals, but it is not up to the scale and the speed that is not very much needed. I think that on our Stockholm plus 50 and the outcomes and the summaries and the recommendations, specifically that it is a multi-stakeholder forum, this would be very helpful for us and for all policymakers to give a clear indication that we are building on science, one, that we are taking into consideration the different views of the different stakeholders. This is not a government-only owned process, but it has the NGOs, the youth, private sector, everybody is engaging. And three, it is also building and taking into consideration what science is telling us, which was a totally different story 50 years ago or even 30 years ago. For us as Team Egypt, if I would like to call, and together with Team Finland, we have worked on the background note with UNEP and other supporting teams. We hope that we have provided a good background note and some questions that would provoke discussions, that will bring in many of the elements that we have been saying or that was reflected in some of the documents, including how can we ensure that we are working into incentivizing a new financial, I would say, ecosystem. I would like to use the ecosystem approach that will deliver, that will make sure that no one is left behind, that will make sure that all the aspirations of the young generations and the youth and even us as older people is going to materialize, and that we are going to deliver on the pledges and commitments that we have provided. I don't want to take a lot of time. I should leave it to the participants to engage. But I think I would have to say like two things. From our perspective, we hope that the discussions would bring together views on innovative finance, and that would be also very sensitive and cognizant of the different starting points and the challenges that faces some of us in relation to that, and also the need for that change in the mindset and the thinking that is already now in many of the policymakers' heads, and we can see it in the political will in many of the decisions, that this would trickle to the financial, our colleagues and brothers and sisters in the financial system and the financial ecosystem. We need to redefine with the word of bankable projects to be very much in line with nature and environmental outcomes. We need to work on enhancing the instruments that is provided to countries to make sure that they deliver on their potentials, and we need to move forward as fast as possible and at scale to deal with the challenges that we're facing. I'll stop there. I know I always like to talk a lot. I come from a climate change background, but I'll stop there, and we'll be looking forward to engaging in a very fruitful discussions, led of course by our colleagues from Finland and our team here from Environment and Foreign Affairs, Team Egypt, as I would say. So back to you, Asad. Thank you so much for facilitating this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Nasser. And I will probably summarize a couple of points from your intervention after I have given the floor to Annika.
Thank you, Asad. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all, and greetings from the capital of Finland, Helsinki. First of all, let me thank you, Sweden and Kenya, for inviting Finland to co-chair this Leadership Dialogue 3 together with Egypt. And I promise to do my utmost to support you in our efforts to make the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting a great success. So my name is Annika Lindblom, and I'm the Director for International EU Affairs in the Ministry of the Environment of Finland. And I'm in charge of the preparatory process towards the Stockholm Plus 50 as regards the Leadership Dialogue 3. And my Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Mrs. Emma Kari, will be the chair during the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting. My background is in sustainable development. I was negotiating the Rio Plus 20 outcome document, the 2030 agenda. I've also worked as a Secretary General of the National Commission for Sustainable Development. So sustainable development is very close to my heart. And nowadays I'm working very closely on my unit with UNEP and UNEA affairs. And I was very happy to bring great results from UNEA last week that we can really build upon when we are moving towards Stockholm plus 50. So as has been explained in the background document, the aim of the Stockholm plus 50 leadership dialogues is to engage governments, international organizations, major groups and stakeholders, as well as the private sector to overcome barriers to implementation, to connect actions and create the pathways to achieve the SDGs. This leadership dialogue 3 to me is about how to get there. It is about accelerating the implementation. What are the means? What are the mechanisms? What are the institutional arrangements that can help the governments, the businesses, and the whole of society to make the transition to sustainable development? Of course, we need to remind ourselves on the means that we have already committed to. What are the promises? What are our promises to the humanity and to the planet? But Stockholm plus 50 is also, and I would emphasize foremost, about innovating new actions, harnessing the untapped potential and operationalizing the low-hanging fruits. And as a co-chair, I would definitely encourage everybody to be bold, to be innovative, even radical if need be in your interventions. Let's make good use of the fact that this is not a negotiation meeting. All ideas are good ideas if they are implementable and can speed up our efforts to achieve the SDGs as soon as possible. I thank you and looking forward to lively discussion with all of you.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you, Ambassador Nasser, for setting the scene and your welcome remarks. Ambassador Nasser, we will be coming back to you for setting the broader scene when we start the discussion on the finance part of today's meeting. But now I would like to give the floor to Stephen Stone. Stephen Stone is the Deputy Director of the Economy Division in UNEP, where he has been the content leader for the leadership dialogues and the background papers that you may have seen. So Stephen, it's over to you to present the background papers, the relationship between the 3 leadership dialogues, and then probably a little more on today's leadership dialogue, which is on the leadership dialogue 3 and its background paper.
Thank you very much, Assad. And thank you, Cecilia and Dr. Macharia, our co-hosts from Sweden and Kenya, and of course, Annika and Ambassador Nasser, our co-chairs for today's conversation. So just a few words about where we are and how to situate this conversation in the larger context. It all comes from a General Assembly resolution mandate that was approved last fall. And so these leadership dialogues take the overall theme towards a healthy planet for prosperity of all. And it breaks it down into 3 of the leadership dialogues. Next slide, please. Today, as you've heard, we're focusing on accelerating implementation. And Annika, as you said, how to get there, really the means, how to get there, the capacity, the finance, the technology, and scaling up those. And as you said, Assad, the conversation today is structured around those 4 sort of top lines. And from UNEP's perspective, and I would say a UN perspective, it's really good to have all of the feedback that we can get today. All ideas are good ideas, as you said, Annika, and we need the bold, radical thinking. The other 2, yesterday we had the first informal working group on LD2, which is on a sustainable and inclusive recovery. It looks at the impact of COVID and how, as we recover from COVID collectively, how do we transform those sectors of the economy with the largest footprints, the largest climate, nature, and pollution footprints, but also the job footprints of the future? And how do we harness innovation and technology for that, while also leveraging global and South-South cooperation? Very good discussion yesterday. I hope many of you could have joined it. And tomorrow, the conversation shifts to Leadership Dialogue 1, which is really the big picture. It's how do you move towards a healthy planet and prosperity for all? It looks at transforming our relationship with nature, restoring ecosystems, producing and consuming sustainably, and fighting pollution. and social justice and intergenerational equity. The co-chairs of Leadership Dialogue 1 are Canada and Ecuador. For Dialogue 2, it was our colleagues from Germany and Indonesia. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, in this print is probably too small to be of any use to you, but the background papers are structured around questions. So the top lines: scaling up finance, governance and institutional reform, digital transformation and effective partnerships. The conversation today, which Assad is helping to facilitate with our co-chairs from Finland and Egypt, will try to elucidate those answers to these questions. And of course, feel free to go beyond the questions as well, but that's the structure of the conversation today. And we have a wonderful team from GGKP to help us work through those questions in terms of how do we scale up finance and what sort of institutional reforms are needed. The last slide, please, just simply situates this conversation within the flow to Stockholm. And Cecilia, you have invited everyone to come to Stockholm for June 2nd and 3rd. There's also a meeting point in New York on the 28th, and your feedback today to the co-chairs and to the UNEP team and the co-hosts will enable us to make sure that we capture, to the extent possible in the background document, those insights that you can bring to the table today, those recommendations, those best practices, those bold ideas that you could bring to the table, and ultimately bring them into Stockholm. So with that, Assad, I'll close and back to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for providing the broader context and how things are connected at the back end. So now we will start the discussion on our first topic, which is on scaling up finance. You may have seen the topic also covered in the background note, as well as a few questions that were put there. But to facilitate the discussion and refresh everyone's memories, I would like to invite Ambassador Nasser as the co-chair of this leadership dialogue to give some opening remarks that will frame the discussion and set the scene, and then we will move into an open discussion. For the open discussion, there are a few people who have already registered to share their ideas and their feedback. So we will be inviting on them, and then we will also open the floor for those who may like to share their ideas based on the discussions today. So over to you, Ambassador Nasser.
Thank you so much, and I will try to refrain from giving like any direction or any views on the issue of discussion. We are here as facilitators, so we'll try to listen to as many inputs as we can. But I have, I mean, like on this specific issue, it is very important to highlight that finance and scaling up finance has always been and will always stay as a cornerstone for the implementation of our environmental commitments or pledges. Not only just finance in its normal term, but how this finance is provided and the access to the finance, and is it provided through the right instruments or not to the different countries. And this two elements or three elements I always highlight. One is that we need to ensure that there's country ownership, and this is already ensured through the different environmental agreements, and also the sustainable development approach and the sustainable development goals, whereby countries are the ones coming forward with their plans, their actions, their potentials, and trying to fund them as much as they can from national resources, but also looking at the enhanced global partnership that is envisaged in the Agenda 2030 to complement. So this is the first point. The second point is that there is a reality that we are facing now, specifically in many developing countries, where after COVID, there are a lot of competing priorities and I would say also challenges, starting from debt burden in many developing countries, going to social and economic needs. But although they are challenges in themselves, but they also can provide opportunities through innovation. So if we have an innovative approach to that, like debt swaps or something, if you have an innovative approach on what we always mention and repeat, enabling environment, how can we do that from both sides, from developed countries and developing countries, through being innovative, cooperative, and cognizant of the different needs and circumstances of the countries. Those are main points that would guide us, together with a very important component, which is how can we incentivize the flows of the billions and the trillions from the private sector and from the different sources to really help us in the not only environment agenda, but on the environment agenda at large, which is the environment, social, and economic agendas. And we believe that there is always an interlinkage between the environmental, social, and economic part. The SDGs are clear. And this is one of the legacies, by the way, of Stockholm, where it highlighted the potential of having the development at the three sites. However, the questions that we have there aims, again, as I said, to provoke the discussion, to also bring forward the different views from different stakeholders from different parts of the world, to bring in maybe innovative ideas and focus on how can we really move from the planning phase that we are in now in most of the environmental agreements. You have targets, you have plans, you have potentials, but when it comes to the ground, I mean, we need to see action. We need to see action at scale. We need to see action that is happening very quickly. My last point, again, as I said in my opening remarks, the mindset that we have already. I mean, everybody agrees. Science is telling us, policymakers are telling us, NGOs are telling us, we as people are witnessing the importance of environmental dimension and its impact and interlinkage and interconnectivity to social and economic dimensions, that I think there is a need for the financial institutions also to be part of this. And we hope that through the discussions here and the recommendations and the summaries, we will be also pushing forward those institutions to redefine their bankability, redefine their accessibility policies, redefine their policies to be more of environment friendly and environment focused to achieve the results that we all aspire. I will stop there. I don't want to take more time. Thank you so much, Asad, and together with Anika in Finland, I hope that we will get like the best outcome that is up to the expectation of the people before anybody else. And thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Nasser. We will now open the floor for interventions. There are a few people who have already registered to contribute to this part of the discussion. I would like to mention a few names, and I would like to request them to please raise your hands, your virtual hands, so that the technical team can unmute you. So we will start with Christian Zucker from Trinidad and Tobago, Arunaba Ghosh from Council on Energy, Water and Environment, Nubrat Bukiba from MBVM, Suzanne Barria, Paula Francisco from Government of Angola, and Daniel Barlow. But while you are unmuting yourself and your audio is being enabled, I would just like to refresh the few points that I heard from the first two interventions from the co-chairs. Number one, I think when you're making your intervention, let's just keep those things fresh in mind. Number one, Ambassador Nasser was very clear. It's about scale and speed. How can we accelerate action at speed and scale that is required to meet the challenges that we are facing? I think it was also important to build on science. That was the second message which was coming out very clearly. And the third word, which I really liked, was the financial ecosystems. It's not only about finance, it's about the whole financial ecosystem being made supportive of the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. But then he lastly said, we cannot separate environment from economic and social dimensions of sustainable development. These things are interlinked. And that's where the policy coherence, the second part of the discussion, will be very useful on institutions and governance mechanisms. And then just to take few words from Anika's contribution to inform the discussion that will follow now, be bold, be radical, be out of the box, and be innovative in the solutions that we need now. We are facing unprecedented challenges, so the solutions have also to be unprecedented. So with this, can I invite Ms. Christian Zucker to please take the floor and share your ideas. We will be limiting the speaking to 2 minutes, but then you will be able to provide your written feedback through different forums.
Thank you for the floor, Chair, Co-Chairs, Member States, and distinguished delegates. I am Christian Zucker from Trinidad and Tobago, speaking on behalf of the Stockholm +50 Youth Task Force. Harmful and polluting activities causing environmental and social costs can be internalized by the polluter pay principle. All countries and companies that have benefited from exploitation urgently need to utilize a fair percentage of profits towards the benefit of environmental protection beyond their borders. First, we want to recognize the success of initiatives like the UNEP Financial Initiative in responsible banking, responsible investment, and sustainable insurance. Second, the debt burden of nations is set to increase substantially in the context of the triple planetary threat, and not all nations will experience this equally. It is essential that the loss and damages funding is scaled up and that capital and debt markets are utilized to ease debt burdens while supporting eco-conservation. COP27 should tackle the issue of loss and damage. Third, we want to highlight the very important need of building the capacity of young people to engage with financial institutions. A notable example is the Bank of England Youth Forum. Stockholm Plus 50 recommendations should call upon the MDBs to engage meaningfully with young people and build their capacity through programs, funding, and designated engagement spaces and forums. Finally, we highlight in the context of Stockholm Plus 50, member states have supported the youth constituency financially directly. This is a model which should be built on for future multilateral processes. The Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force will also be producing recommendation on the same. Thank you for the floor.
Thank you very much for your intervention, and thank you so much for bringing these ideas, especially related to youth. May I now invite Arunabha Ghosh, please, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Naqvi, and many thanks to Egypt and to Finland for convening this conversation. I'm Arunabha Ghosh. I'm the CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. CEW and the Stockholm Environment Institute are writing the technical report for Stockholm Plus 50. I also serve on the UN Committee for Development Policy. The objective function before us is three questions. Is enough finance flowing? Second, is it flowing to the right countries? Third, is it flowing at the right cost? The answer, to paraphrase, is no for all three questions. And that is what we have to solve for. Therefore, I have three propositions. First, how do we ensure that large volumes of capital flows to developing countries at lower costs of capital? The proposition here is to create a global clean investment risk mitigation mechanism, which would pool the risks across countries and across projects. And that risk pooling will reduce the insurance premiums associated with finance and bring down the costs and channel a lot more investment. Second proposition, related to the debt problem. One of the major challenges with debt is the kinds of shocks that climate change, pandemics, and global shocks will impose on countries. And therefore, creating a global resilience fund would pay out when thresholds of shocks are crossed to the most vulnerable countries, and thereby ensure that their debt overhang is reduced while we create an insurance cushion for the most vulnerable. Number three, to bring it closer, the energy transition and sustainability closer to communities. The proposition here is to power livelihoods globally by using distributed clean energy for income generating activities, by pooling public, philanthropic, and private funds, and helping to scale up small businesses that can use clean energy sources, but to drive incomes and not just light up a bulb inside a poor man's hut. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was really great. So three concrete ideas coming in one minute and 30 seconds. That's a great example. So may I now go to Nubret Bubika?
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. I thank for organizing committee for inviting and organizing this wonderful events. First of all, I want to state that scaling up financing for environment should not be just a goal, but it should be binding to countries' domestic law. Most environmental countries, especially in LDCs, lack the infrastructure to start or engage any form of environment. Stewardship for the world can be achieved by assuring that low polluters gain from the finance that can heal the world. At the global level, we need to know that the value and the nexus that is in front of us goes now with health, new technologies, and also looking for eco cycle. We need to be ready to model everything that we are talking about today to the next level. We do have the water conference that's coming up, which is gonna be everybody's. Sorry, I lost my thought there. That would be everybody, diverse range of idea. We need to be ready to come together to understand how resource-driven conflict are forcing the issue. We need to be ready. We need to put our hands together to understand conflict, synergy, and trade-off between them. What are the important? What are the linkage? Can we continue this way, or should we provide solution to countries that need it the most? And importantly, is the global educations. We need to be able to share our idea to other side of the world. Everybody need to be included. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babuka, for these ideas. I will now go to Susana Barria from Public Services International. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. When we speak about scaling up financing, we also need to consider that we need a public funded path to development. And for this, government policies and fiscal space need to be enabled in this direction rather than limited by fiscal restrictions and constraints. To tap the private sector financial capacity, its wealth, we need to be able to reform the corporate taxation system. In this, the new G20 deal is not enough. A meaningful reform needs to result in substantial additional revenues for low and middle income countries. And current estimates indicate that only 2% of the additional revenues created by the G20 deal would occur to low and middle income countries. Multinational companies need to be taxed as single entities, but at least at 25% rate with a wide scope on application. Further, low and middle income countries are facing incredible financial pressure that threatens their ability to fulfill SDGs and states' human rights obligations, including because of claims that are raised by private companies against states under the controversial investor-state dispute settlement mechanism of the trade and investment regime. For instance, Pakistan was asked to pay $5.8 billion to a mining company. This represents a quarter of the government's total annual budget. On the other hand, the company had spent only $220 million on exploration and will receive more than 25 times the amount invested. This is an extraordinary return on investment at a time when Pakistan required all its resources to respond to the pandemic. So these human rights obligations of countries towards its population should prevail over the rights of investors provided by trade and investment agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really good points. Looking at the public finance, the challenges that low and middle income countries are facing, and looking at the corporate tax side of the things. Thank you. May I now go to Paula Francisco from Government of Angola. The floor is yours.
Assad, I believe she's not on the line, so we could move to the next.
Thank you, Megan. We now move on to Daniel Barlow, BSI R2050 World.
Thank you for the floor and for facilitating this conversation. I'm Daniel Barlow from the United Kingdom's national standards body, BSI, but representing a global collaboration, our 2050 World. The standards that we define and apply in this decade will determine our path to net zero. Standards, in particular international standards, underpin the real economy, will play a critical role harnessing the groundswell of voluntary commitments from non-state actors. Commitment and action using standards will in turn motivate and give confidence to national governments to step up and strengthen their own commitment and ambition. Optimizing the use of standards will support the transition to net zero of global, regional, and national market frameworks. It is key to activating the ambition loop between non-state actors and national governments and enabling a swift, equitable transition to net zero. I would like to highlight our 2050 World an open collaboration led by BSI, ISO, and the UN's Race to Zero campaign, but with support from national standards bodies from Canada, Kenya, and Trinidad and Tobago. Our aim is to support non-state actors to accelerate their race to zero using standards and enable the planet to halve emissions by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050 at the latest. We intend to facilitate alignment to net zero mobilization through guiding principles which will be published before COP27. These guiding principles will enable alignment of mobilization, including strong voluntary initiatives, advocates, including orchestration campaigns and international organizations, international and national standards and policies, including regulation. You can find out more about this at www.our2050.world. And just to reflect on the conversation so far, I completely agree that we do need to be radical, be bold, and take unprecedented steps. But we also need to build momentum immediately, globally, and where possible through existing systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was perfectly timed for 2 minutes. You saw that you were on the dot when you finished your intervention. So really nice to see the attention also to the role that the standards can play. Number one, to bring the non-state and state actors together, but also leading to net zero, and then the role that the strong voluntary initiatives can also play. I would like to take a pause here, basically to come back to the two co-chairs, and especially I would come to Ambassador Nasser if he has any feedback or reactions to any of the interventions, because these were quite rich, coming from different angles or on the finance. So you see that it was coming from youth and it was coming from private sector, etc. And then also I would like to check if the UNEP content team may like to react to any of these ideas that have come before we move into the second round of discussions. So may I first go to Marie-Yu? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Assad. First of all, my name is Miran Gubran. I'm part of the team of Ambassador Mohammed Nasr. I'm just apologizing. He had to step out because for an important call with the minister. So it's an honor for me to take his place. Quite a challenge to replace him. But first of all, actually, the first round of intervention, actually, it was very overwhelming for me, because I think from what we're expecting from this discussion is to be, as we said, innovative and bold and having new ideas. I think we all agree that all the finance, it's an important and a cornerstone for any implementation of, if you want to really have an international goal and to reach out the SDG and the climate change challenges. Of course, I agree, going through all the point, I cannot do it, but let me highlight a few points. I agree, definitely loss and damage is an important track and important element that everybody should focus more on it, on all the stakeholders. And as part of the team of the COP27, I would like to highlight that definitely loss and damage is an important track that we're taking into account during the COP. Our goal is to have an achievement on all tracks, but mainly adaptation and loss and damage, because this is actually the incoming and the imminent threat and challenge for the coming years. We have to, if I want to also highlight that from all the approaches and the intervention, I feel that they all agree to have a collective and inclusiveness approach in scaling up finance and finding an innovative solution. Not only for specific country, but it should be for all countries. Mainly the developing countries that are facing not only the challenge of the climate change, but the repercussion also of the COVID and all this, the challenge that we lived for almost 3 years. As having my background on energy, and energy field, I would like also to note that, yes, energy transition, and actually we like to call it energy just transition, that is also an important element, and we need to hear more about, actually, I'm looking forward for more discussion about how to really implement it on an innovative way and putting into consideration the socio and economic impact of it. I think I'll stop here because I'm eager to take more intervention. Thank you, Asad.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for enriching the discussions. Now we will move on to the second round of interventions. There are some people who have already expressed interest in taking the floor, and we will be going to them before coming back to maybe another round of conclusions on this one. So may I now invite Kathy Yitong Lee to raise her hand, Bhavna Chaudhary from India, and Mr. Arab Habullah to please raise your hand so that your mics can be unmuted. And I will invite Kathy to please take the floor.
Asad, I believe Kathy is not on the line, so we could move to the next participant. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Can we move on to then Bhavna Chaudhary for Indigenous Peoples Movement? Yes,
Hello?
Bhavna, the floor is yours. I can hear you.
Hi. All right. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I represent an Indigenous youth organization called The Indigenous. We work on knowledge sharing across different platforms by bringing the voices of Indigenous youth to the global space. I'm here today because I would like to point out that Indigenous peoples, who are the largest managers of biodiversity on the planet, were initially left out of the Stockholm Declaration and also the Millennium Development Goals. Now, acknowledging the contribution of Indigenous peoples as a major stakeholder in combating climate change is the first step that we consider is important for us as representatives of Indigenous youth. And we are looking forward to collaborating with this committee to bring forward these particular ideas. Indigenous languages that are representative of over 3,000 languages are currently at stake of extinction, whereas 60% of the content on the internet today is represented in English. This means that there is a large level of language loss and by extent knowledge of the environment. Whereas we represent 80% of the biodiversity managers on the planet, our languages are lost and by extent, the knowledge that comes with it. Therefore, we are here to request for any and all forms of inclusion of Indigenous peoples and youth through this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhavna, and thank you for inviting attention to the issues which the Indigenous communities face and the youth in Indigenous communities face. These are definitely documented and will be part of our recommendations or summary of today's discussions. May I now invite Arab Habullah of Seed Initiatives to take the floor. Arab, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Asad. Thank you to the chairs and co-chairs. My intervention will be focused on one point, what I call the elephant in the room, the small and medium enterprises that have not been reflected in any of the background papers and without whom we cannot seriously accelerate the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development. So it's essential to make the financial architecture accessible to the small and medium enterprises, which are between the large business and between the very small ones, which we call the missing middle. They need to have tailored financing tools that bridge this missing middle. And achieving the sustainable development goals depend a lot on locally grounded action to build resilience and sustainability. And those actions rely mainly on local authorities and local small and medium enterprises. Hence, we need to adapt the financial architecture to the small and medium enterprises, the missing middle context. We need to leverage the climate finance and the potential of climate smart SMEs to create low emission alternatives directly reduce emission and clean up the environment, which makes them really the perfect candidate for climate finance. As I said earlier, we need to redesign the finance architecture to let them access this. Policymakers can learn a lot from eco-inclusive enterprises and intermediaries that moved in the context of the pandemic largely to the use of digital technologies and start to develop digital tools to overcome infrastructure constraints and to make their products and services more accessible. So we need to rethink the existing public management approaches. And finally, when it's come to the fiscal and monetary authorities, they struggle to show evidence that SMEs are benefiting from economic and fiscal policies. Government can help to expand the market for green product in order to help eco-inclusive SMEs make a better business case for investing in greener product. The procurement system need to be greener and recognize the small and medium enterprises. In this context, this is an essential step to make sure that small and medium enterprises are recognized and can effectively have their role in accelerating the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Arab. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting attention to the small and medium enterprises. May I now go to Linda Wong, China Biodiversity Conservation, and after that, Ms. Teresa Jiffer, if I pronounced it correctly. And then the final intervention will come from Zakir Hussain, who is a farmers representative from Bangladesh. So first over to Linda Wong.
I think Linda may not be with us, so we could move to Teresa next. Thanks, Assad.
We moved to Teresa Giffre. Teresa, the floor is yours. And in case Teresa is not here, can we move to Zakir Hussain, who is a farmers representative from Bangladesh? Zakir, the floor is yours. I'm not sure if this is a technical issue, but in case Zakir is not there, we can move to our next registered speaker. And I would like to request them. Zakir, are you here?
Yeah, I am here. Can you hear me?
Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Assad. Sorry for the disturbance. Now, while the climatic problem is a global issue, but the solutions lies at the local level. But unfortunately, only 7 to 8% of climate fund reach the locality. Then the question is how to channel the climatic fund available to the local level directly. To do that, capacity building of the local community to manage the fund is crucial, as well as capacity building of the donor side, such as what to fund, where to fund, how to fund is also important. Thank you. Back to you, Assad.
Thank you, Zakir, and great point to bring the discussion to the capacity building of both donors and locals for finance management. So may I now move on a bit quickly to Santosh Vangupan, and then after that to Evelina Startori Valek. My apologies for my pronunciations, and then we will go to Mr. Abu Bakr Ali. So the floor is given now to Santosh.
Yeah, good evening, chairs and co-chairs for giving the opportunity. This is Dr. V. Santosh Kumar, a professor from Vistas University from India. General points here, I want to emphasize the general points. Respect, pray, and live along with Mother Nature. That shows right path to humanity. Second point, consideration should be given to focus the issue, either climate change or pandemic situation, according to the Mother Nature's point of view and according to the science. Mother Nature oriented science is good for the planet, because day by day, the humanity, we are utilizing the Mother Nature resources, and humanity should give consideration to protect the earth resources from the nature's inherent mechanisms by which ecosystems governs the emergence of new pathogens. Nature is linked to human health. However, by depleting the Earth's natural resources, we are losing ourselves of these free benefits and weakening our resistance to new diseases. So again, consideration should be given to the Mother Nature and Mother Nature resources to protect all these things. Thank you, Chair, for giving the
Thank you very
opportunity.
much. Thank you. Thank you for raising the issue of Mother Nature and the value of ecosystem services. May I now give the floor to Evelina? Evelina, if you're here, the floor is yours. If not, can we give the floor now to Mr. Abu Bakr Ali?
It appears Abu is not on the line. If we could move to the next speaker.
Thank you, Megan. Can we give the floor now to Tom Clemon of UK government, and then Sebastian Gill from European Commission. So Tom, floor is yours.
Tom is also not on the line.
Okay, okay, Sebastian, can I give the floor to you because I can see you are here.
Okay, thank you very much, Assad. Thank you, UNEP, for the a very good background paper, and of course, great thanks to Sweden, Kenya for hosting Stockholm +50, and Egypt and Finland for organizing these leadership dialogues. I would like to share a few points from the European Union and its member states, specifically on the issue of scaling up finance and how to make sure that the funding goes to the places where it's needed. So I would like to make 4 points. First is with regard to convergence, and we would like to stress the need to converge the climate and biodiversity finance as well as other finance that is relevant for the environment, and that should be done through innovative financing models, as well as the reforms of the fiscal systems and subsidies. Secondly, is the issue of the shift of finance and the fiscal systems, moving them away from supporting activities that harm the environment, including phasing out the environmental harmful subsidies, divesting from fossil fuels, and from measures that spur deforestation. Thirdly, is the engagement with private sector and private finance. And 4 is to make sure that we measure the economic impacts of environmental and financial risks that are related, and also that we account for natural capital. I would also like to make 2 small points that are general for this discussion, as well as other points that we're discussing today. For us, it is extremely important that we make the use of Stockholm +50 to address the issues that are really gaps in our approach to sustainable development, and the finance is one, but also as regards the governance, we also need to be sure that we address issues that are not addressed elsewhere. And here, finance, sustainable consumption, production, resource efficiencies are the key points. And lastly, to make this really impactful, we need to bring these issues to relevant processes. And here I would like to highlight the HLPF, the second SDG summit under the auspices of the Secretary General, as well as the UN Secretary General Common Agenda process that should accommodate any outcomes of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Good inputs and taken note. And I would also like to take note that all the discussion, there is a very active discussion going on in the chat box, and that is also being harvested and taken note of, as well as the question and answers that are being put, they are all being taken care of. And there are other opportunities for you to provide inputs. I would like again to request my colleagues to put in the link for number 1, the Google form through which you can provide your inputs and very concrete ideas, as well as for the community space at Green Forum. I would like to invite now the 3 last speakers who have requested for floor, and I would like to request you to focus really on, as we were saying, number 1 on finance, because this session is about finance. Number 2, innovative, practical, and accelerated action. So these are the few things which I would just like to remind. May I invite Fulvia Rocha Lores, and after that, Owen Gaffney from Earth for All, and lastly, Dr. Srada Prasad. So the floor is with Flavia.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for giving me the mic, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm calling from Brazil, and from a developing country perspective, we still see a lot of instances where financial institutions or companies themselves have one behavior in their home country and a different behavior in our countries, especially with local communities and indigenous territories, development projects. So what I'm trying to say in terms of, I'm a lawyer, so in terms of legislation and enforcement, things like national law that France has passed on due diligence that applies at home and abroad, things like that should be happening more often, and developed countries should be keeping a closer eye on what their companies do abroad, because this is something that's been happening forever and still happens. And I think it's a huge source of impacts in some of the areas that are mega diverse. That's all for now. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Flavia. May I now give the floor to Owen for his ideas on accelerating financial actions?
Thank you, Egypt. Thank you, Finland, for this call. Yeah, I'm from Earth for All, a new international initiative for new economic thinkers and systems dynamics modelers. So I really have 3 points here. The first one is, this is a planetary emergency. How can we act at speed and scale on the finance system? Well, here's the first point. I mean, this is not new. We've had emergency financing in 2008 for the global financial crisis at the kind of scale we need to deal with the climate and environmental emergency, and again in the last 3 years for the global pandemic. So this absolutely can be done. We can act at scale on financial to deal with these problems through the financial system. The second point on finance and development, three ideas here, not so new, but they still seem radical. Yes, cancel debt, as has been mentioned already. Debt is like deep snow piling up on a steep mountainside. It can collapse at any moment and cause absolute chaos. So this, as a risk reduction mechanism, is absolutely essential for driving change. And then we need radical ideas on cutting risk for developing countries to adapt. For example, a new international currency fund. I can give more information on that. Or special drawing rights and special drawing rights through IMF mechanisms. Give low-income countries and middle-income countries the same kind of solutions that the US and Europe are able to act on. And then finally, one of the reasons we cannot make progress on these big issues is that we find it difficult to make long-term decisions. A lot of this is to do with rising inequality between countries and within countries. So addressing inequality is going to be essential to build long-term trust between the elite and the rest of the world. And on that, the transformation will be disruptive, and so we will need to build in safety nets. The energy transition, the food transition will be disruptive. We need safety nets for everybody during that transition, which means tax, it means universal basic income, and even big ideas like a universal basic dividend. Thank you, chairs.
Thank you so much. That was really a system dynamic thinking. I'm a big fan of that. So you were able to bring so many ideas together and then connect them very well. Definitely very, very concrete ideas. Thank you so much. And may I now go to Dr. Srada Prasad, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for inviting me to this, to intervene in this very important discussion of Stockholm Plus 50. Well, I am calling from India, and I'm associated with an ECOSOC status United Nations organization, that is Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, where we actually involve or accommodate youth across the globe to find out the solutions for their various problems. And I would like to intervene in the second part, that is innovation, technology, and the solution for the better planet. I will stick to SDG 17 as per the United Secretary General speech, that we have to adopt a concept of PPP, people, planet, and prosperity. So what happens? The technology and the research, whatever devised by the developed countries or developing countries, are not uniformly distributed across the globe, so that the youth, women, and the people living with disabilities cannot get the proper technology so as to withstand the climate change resilience, maybe it pollution, maybe biodiversity, or any environmental sustainability. So my point is that Stockholm Plus 50 should include that there should be a patent-free technology in the agriculture or in climate change resilience, or any research should be patent-free, so that it will be available across the globe. All the youth can get that benefit, because everyone wants improved technology to increase the production, agricultural production, to withstand the climate change and the pollutions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good ideas, and what a rich discussion during this first session on accelerating and scaling up finance. I would like to go back now to the co-chairs for their responses. If I may I go first to Annika from Finland, if she would like to share her ideas or how she felt the discussion went. And then I will go back to Egypt for the concluding remarks on this session. So Annika, may I invite you?
Thank you, Assad. And this discussion definitely shows how many different perspectives can be brought up in this discussion and under this topic, scaling up finance. I think that ensuring that public and private finances no longer exacerbate, but rather mitigate climate change and pollution and support nature-based solutions and biodiversity is at the core of this discussion, so that the finances that is already out there is spent in a sustainable manner that supports people and the planet. I think this is like the structural challenge and issue that we are facing. And also, I think that we have talked about the climate financing, but I think one of the questions is also how to promote financing that considers not only the climate benefits, but also have positive impact on the environment and biodiversity, because those two are not necessarily complementary. I mean, they can be also against each other, and this is also something that we have recognized here in Finland. So we need to. It would be great to use the Stockholm Plus 50 discussions also as an opportunity to promote the convergence of climate and biodiversity finance, maybe through innovative financing models. I have also been, a bit puzzled by the fact that, and I think this was also something that was raised in the chat and in the Q&A, that we talk about financial and human-made capital, but we don't talk so much about natural capital, human capital, or social capital, and those are equally important. And if we think of smart economics and a smart economic policy, I think those all four should be regarded as important for sustainable development. And maybe I know that there have been attempts to operationalize natural capital accounting, for instance, in some countries, and that might be a good way forward in also more broadly in various countries. And my last point is that I suppose, and I think that the current pandemic actually has reinforced the need to redirect money and financing towards sustainable projects in order to make our economies, businesses, and societies, and especially, of course, the health systems at the moment, more resilient against climate and environmental shocks, so that we can actually get more prepared in future crises by investing more in natural capital, actually. And my last point is, I saw one question there on the role of women and And because this struck me as well, because the sort of the frustration that I read from this comment, that women are many times seen as victims or targets instead of actors and agents for change, and really persons who have solutions. And I think this applies also to other groups like young people or disabled groups or so forth. So that really make best use of all the human resources that we have, that have really can support sustainable solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you for taking the questions from the Q&A as well. May I now go to Miranda, please, for your concluding remarks on this session on finance, and then we will move on to the second session, which is on governance and institutional reforms. So,
thank you.
Miranda,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Asad. I'll be very brief, because it's very, as you said, it's very rich discussion and intervention and ideas. And building on what Annika also said, it's I think it's what we can wrap up from all this intervention. I think we'll all agree that the scale up finance, it's crucial. It's important, have to be done immediately. All the importance of nature-based solution, and also reference to the science, it's very important when we're trying to find innovative ways. I think the last Ipcc report, it's big demonstration that we need fast action. Definitely, I agree that on the local level, it's a global issue, it's a global challenge, but the local solution can be also a way, because this will make a difference for each and specification, for every country. I see that we need to channel more finance to the SMEs, because right now, after the pandemic and all this challenge that we face, it proved that the small and SMEs are actually a way forward to help improve the economy away from all this lockdown that we face. So I think, and with that, I'll end to hear more about the more intervention and other session. Back to you, Asad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the attention to the small and medium enterprises. And I will add probably the smallholder farmers and investing in nature and ecosystems, which does not only offer opportunities for improving the ecosystem services or the ecological foundation of our economy, but also the best way forward probably for poverty reduction and addressing inequalities. So with this, we will conclude this first part of today's discussion, which was on scaling up finance. We would like now to start the discussion on the second part, which is on governance and institutional reforms. Now and I will invite co-chair from Finland, Annika, to probably set the stage for the discussion. I will just say one sentence, and which connects the two parts, which I heard recently, was that, okay, only finance will not fill the policy void which exists in many parts of the world. And that's where probably the role of governance and institutional reforms is very important. So I will give the floor to Annika to frame the discussion, and then we will go into a few verbal interventions. Annika, floor is yours.
Thank you, Asad. Yeah, just a brief introduction from my side, and then I open the floor. So implementing the 2030 agenda will depend on strengthened institutions that are fit for purpose. And this applies both internationally and nationally. And this is also from my own experience when I was working in the National Commission for Sustainable Development, trying to find different ways in which we can speed up the national implementation of the 2030 agenda. I noticed that we cannot deliver coherent, integrated, and inclusive responses to the 2030 agenda if we don't have a robust governance for sustainable development in place. So the business as usual sectoral silo approach is not enough. For example, if the environmental dimension of the SDGs is considered and implemented only by the environmental authorities and actors, the transformative change will remain elusive. And of course, here, for instance, the International Finance Ministers' Climate Coalition is a good example of broad ownership that is needed. And the other way around, of course, environmental authorities and organizations need to consider economic and social aspects in their decisions if they wish to have maximum impact and legitimation for the environmental action. So this goes both ways. And we need to get out of our comfortable institutional and sectoral silos and provide safe space for integrated solutions, both nationally and in international cooperation. The establishment of climate cabinets, ministries for sustainable development or circular economy strategies, for example, show that there is a growing appetite for new institutional and strategic setups and arrangements. Could the environment and climate ministries and ministers become one day the most powerful decision makers in the national governments and in the United Nations? Even if the governments have the main responsibility to ensure that we reach the 2030 agenda and the SDGs by 2030, they cannot do it alone. We need partners from civil society, from business, from academia, youth, trade unions, and other stakeholders. And only by inclusive dialogue and persistent cooperation with all sectors, with all stakeholders, we can succeed. There is also an increasing focus on sustainable finance, where environmental, social, and governance considerations are taken into account when making investment decisions in the financial sector. Investors and banks want to avoid risks that climate change and biodiversity loss unavoidably cause. There are more examples of breaking the silos and constituencies. For instance, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution last year recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right. Digital technologies are beginning to shape our societies and way of life. But technology is a good servant, but a bad master, I would say. Sustainable society is not just about technologies and technological innovations, but also about social innovations and systemic change of societies. And my last point is that most of all, what we need trust between governments and other key stakeholders and citizens. So no governance model or institutional setup is going to stay alive and deliver sustainable solutions if it is not legitimate among people. And with these words, I would ask Asad to kick off the discussion round on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you for setting the ground for a good discussion. So we hope, and I will just remind that we will stay as innovative, as bold, and as practical as we were for the finance section when we opened the discussion on the institutions and governance side. But I think the few things that Annika just highlighted were, number one, breaking the silos and togetherness. We need to work together. And then technology being a good servant, but a bad master. So may we now open the floor for discussion, and I would like to start with those few who have already registered to speak. So we will start with Mr. Rihannon Mackey from New Zealand, and then we will go to David Kolast and Liukal Zhu. So Rihannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the floor, Chair, Co-Chairs, Member States, and distinguished delegates. I'm Rhiannon Mackey from New Zealand, speaking on behalf of the Stockholm +50 Youth Task Force. As drivers of change, young people are important partners in meeting all the targets of the SDGs in the future and today. The Youth Task Force calls for meaningful engagement with youth, both at Stockholm +50 and in local, national, and international policy development processes. This is vital to the success of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Comprehensive education covering climate change, biodiversity, sustainable consumption, and production must be scaled up and made mandatory in all schools globally. All youth, including marginalized groups, must be able to freely and safely access this education everywhere. Youth listen to and trust other youth. Therefore, there's a strong need for governments to support youth environmental advocates with spaces to develop their ideas, funding, programs, and skills. Sustainable and inclusive development must uphold democracy, freedom of speech, association, organization, and expression. So governments must protect peaceful protesters, organizers, and advocates. We are experiencing a triple planetary crisis. We must immediately and justly transition from fossil fuels and their subsidies worldwide and scale up safe, clean and green energy for all to reach net negative emissions by 2050. As youth, we are keenly aware of the devastating impacts of the climate crisis on current and future generations. There is also urgent need to strengthen independent agencies, departments specializing in environmental affairs, and environmental law to uphold human and environmental rights. We, the youth, are ready to build a society focused on companionship with the living world, rather than human-centered development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And may I now invite David from the Stockholm Resilience Center.
Yes, thank you very much, Asad Nakwi, and thank you for very interesting discussions today. So the Earth for All initiative that Owen Gaffney mentioned earlier has identified these 5 necessary turnarounds for sustainability. And what to acknowledge is the intertwined relationships with the ecology and the planet, incorporating equality, women empowerment, combating poverty, ensuring sustainable food chains, and sustainable energy transformation. And key here is to acknowledge how different sectors in the society, economies, and ecology are intertwined, and to take a systems perspective looking at this. Practically, this can be done through interministerial conversations using integrated modeling, as the one that is also developed now in the Earth for All project, but on an more aggregated level. But the extraordinary turnarounds that are suggested also require reshaping of market and changing our dominant economic worldview from extractive, growth-focused to regenerative in both monetary and material cycles. A key starting point could be for governments to adopt new economic indicators or focus more on alternative indicators that redefine economic value and move far beyond the growth paradigms. And if we act now, the extraordinary turnarounds that are proposed can be achieved by 2050 within a single generation. In that sense, we can ensure that the sustainable development goals are being met within the safe operating space as characterized by the planetary boundaries. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the further conversations.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And I will now give the floor to Liukai Zhu from the Government of China Ministry of Ecology and Environment to give her impressions and ideas for governance and institutional reforms that can accelerate action.
Hello, can you hear
Hello,
me?
sir. Yes, we can hear you very well, sir.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, the colleagues. I'd like to respond to the question, the first question. I think first we need new drivers of governance, such as global development initiatives. President Xi Jinping on the September 21 proposed a global development initiative in steering global development toward a new stage of balanced, coordinated, and inclusive growth in face of the severe shock of the COVID-19. We must vitalize the economy and pursue more robust, greener, and more balanced global development. President Xi also said in his statement delivered via video at the general debate of the 76th section of the United Nations General Assembly. Secondly, I think we need new values for global governance, such as harmony and green. The international community has been committed to the global governance value of peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom. At present, the global triple crisis, namely climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental pollution, remains seriously. COVID-19 has promoted reflection on the relationships between man and nature. Considering the pain and looking to the future, I believe that apart from pursuing the above 6 governance values, we also need to pursue the common governance values of global sustainable development, namely the values of harmony and green.
Thank you.
It's good to note that the Global Biodiversity Governance has proposed a governance vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. Many important resolutions of the United Nations system.
Sir, can we invite you to send the 5 ideas in writing to us, and we will include that in the summary of the discussion today?
Oh, yes, already sent
thank
it,
you so much.
Submitted through the internet. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. May I now give the floor to Jessica Lee, please? Jessica Lee, the floor is yours. And then we will invite Therese Ennison.
Yes. Oh, hello.
Yes, Jessica, the floor is yours. We can hear you well.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair, Co-Chair, for actually convening on this informal working group. And dear Master of Ceremony and distinguished speakers, regarding how to equally and equitably include youth and young adults in decision-making processes, community service works, convenings, investments need to be allocated for youth development, including attaining quality education, mentorship, tutorship, and greater participation and representation in fora and town hall gatherings, where they are either participants and/or direct representatives of specific topics, districts, or causes of influence. STEM education and interactive hubs and networks can be facilitated to create a conglomerate knowledge-sharing effect between the public and the youth and young adults population. Innovative solutions need to be championed and promoted to build the pathway to a sustainable future. And this includes working towards achieving sustainable consumption and production behaviors. Affordability, ease of implementation, and scale of influence also need to be considered. The impacts on different levels, as well as on different stakeholders and environments, need to be closely examined before, during, and after the implementation. Indicators and action plans need to be updated regularly to provide most up-to-date statistics and information to ensure transparency and accountability. The impacts of the global pandemic also extend to community members who do not come from the underserved, under-resourced, and marginalized communities. To achieve an equitable recovery requires a thorough examination, reinvesting in education, development, and community building. An inclusive space for dialogue and action-taking ensures promotion of mutual understanding between public sectors, private sectors, NGO organizations, and civil societies, so that we can collaborate to build back better and recover better. Addressing homelessness, alleviating poverty, increasing equitable access to quality education, promoting strong economic growth, safeguarding public health, tackling adverse impacts caused by climate change, and strengthening infrastructures and institutions are crucial in securing a sustainable future and advancing public welfare. And that's why working on these sustainable development goals demonstrates the commitment and passion for social betterment. I thank you for the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you. May I now invite Therese Ennison, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from the UN Human Rights Office to take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us to this forum. I'll be very brief. We're very pleased to see the references already to human rights in the background paper, and really just underlining that we think that the human rights-based approach and really a people-centered approach is what is needed for sustainable development and to make sure that no one is left behind. We've seen the references to the latest developments at the Human Rights Council, including the resolution which highlights that the interdependency between a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and human rights, and that this, in fact, is the human rights. We're really just keenly listening into discussions and so pleased to see stakeholders from so many different environments, and we'll provide further inputs in writing. So just a very big thanks to everyone for sharing ideas and for discussing. Thank you.
You're most welcome, and thank you for joining the session. May I now go to Jen Lon from NGO Committee on Development.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me, Chair. I wanted to say something on the financing, and of course, we appreciate that we have this very valuable background paper from the co-facilitators, which also recognize that there is need for trillions of dollars which are not there at all to meet the needs, and which surely is a difficulty in a situation when the rich in this world are feeling poorer than ever. So there is need for, obviously, a worldwide people's mobilization to generate resources for global needs. And the possibility of a world conference on financing our global needs is something that could be considered as an important institutional activity. We had the Secretary General of the United Nations who stated at the last Human Rights Council, at the present Human Rights Council session, that this must include an overhaul of the global financial system. And there is much that needs to be discussed, also to bring the international financial institutions in accordance with the ambitions of the UN Charter. So we do have important issues there. We have also issues that were raised in the 1970s after the Stockholm Conference, raised through the Secretariat of UNCED, commissioning a report on new financial resources. That means how to provide resources from global public goods, etc. And that is something to revisit. And finally, we do emphasize the importance of the United Nations Human Rights Treaties on Social and Economic Rights, which calls for the maximum resources to be used, maximum available resources. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Lon. These are great contributions and we appreciate those. And now I would like to invite Mr. Abdul Alarmi from the government of Saudi Arabia, followed by Alex Folowicz. So Mr. Alarmi, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear colleagues. I'm speaking here today on behalf of Saudi Arabia, and it is a pleasure to be with you all today. I just wanted to raise a few points to complement the rich discussion we're having here today, and combine the topics of the first and the second sessions. Initially, our work here and elsewhere must not jeopardize or risk reversing industrial progress, economic growth, progress in other areas, and SDGs more generally, including poverty eradication and sustainable development. Our understanding of sustainable and clean energy has to have inclusivity at its core. We also need more investments in clean energy technologies across the board to ensure that the needs and priorities of developing countries are met, while taking into account their unique national circumstances. In order to really ensure that we reach for our sustainable development goals in 2030 across the board, we need to complement, I'm sorry. In order to reach our sustainable development goals across the board, we need to keep a comprehensive mindset. Any action we take must be inclusive, holistic, and sustainable. There's also a critical need to think with innovation in mind and place the deployment and increase much needed finance to technologies, as well as required support to developing countries in the comprehensive achievement of climate action targets, sustainable development, and poverty eradication. This includes action supporting aspects such as hydrogen removal technologies that are needed for sustainable energy transitions. And of course, I'd close by saying that when discussing and proposing recommendations related to climate finance, we must avoid preempting current discussions of such topics and their respective forums, such as the UNFCCC. And thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I will now invite Alex from the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this space and for the engagement of all of my colleagues here from both government, civil society, and other sectors. And I think one issue that the Stockholm Conference needs to consider, and we should be considering in terms of governance and institutional reform, is the role of fossil fuels. Fossil fuel expansion and use threatens a decade of action and will undermine all 17 of our sustainable development goals. And despite this, the UNEP's production gap report shows that governments are planning to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels that would be consistent with the Paris goals of 1.5 degrees. And so in considering what's needed in terms of the voids that you referred to, Asad, in global governance, a focused approach to the production of fossil fuels is one issue that is missing. And such a focused approach would see a commitment to end new expansion of the industry, something that the IEA has said is necessary for the net zero pathway, and is something that is becoming of increasing importance in the global response to the crisis of the Russian war in Ukraine. And we also would then suggest a way to phase out the production of fossil fuels in line with the goal. And this requires different forms of financing and global governance than what currently exists in, for example, the UNFCCC forum, which is focused much more heavily on the final emissions and the very, very important question of resourcing, adaptation, and loss and damage. But there is a question about how do we support, provide governance and resourcing for the economic diversification and transition that is needed in countries across the world to move away from fossil fuels. And so we hope that the Stockholm Plus 50 can take up this question of the fossil fuel system as one of the key drivers of potential harm to our shared goals and a real opportunity for a more sustainable and prosperous future for all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as you know, this is one of the most rich discussions we have had so far. I would like to invite Annika briefly to respond to the discussion that we have heard so far and the suggestions coming from you. Very briefly, I would say, because our time is short and we still have to go through the third session, which is about partnerships, collective action, and strengthened cooperation. So Annika, would you like to come in?
Yes, very briefly. I heard many important aspects into this particular topic. The role of young people, people's mobilization to make the big transformation, the interdependencies between different constituencies like environment, human rights. Really bringing together this kind of an integrated approach, also in terms of governance and institutional issues. Systems approach is needed. Then I think throughout all the interventions, I think that I heard the need for really this kind of a multi-stakeholder approach, so that we can take everybody on board and provide ownership to all partners and all those who are involved in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. I'm just checking. Tamir, you have your hand up. And Tamir, would you like to take the floor now?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Just I wouldn't take more than 1 minute or 2 minutes. Just I would like to refer before to the interrelation between the SDG, the 17 SDGs, while we have been talking about environment, economic, and social, and all of this matter. And if we will go to the SDGs itself, we will find that underneath the 17, there are 169 targets, where the environmental dimension is well mainstreamed into all the SDGs. So I would like from here to ensure that the ministries or environmental authorities and environmental ministries should work more on mainstreaming the environmental dimensions into all development sectors. That would require, of course, several aspects from the institutional part. We would need to enhance the environmental policy and how this policy should be more integrated into all other development sectors. We would definitely need capacity building. We would need definitely lessons learned, participation from all the stakeholders. And at the same time, we would need to implement what we are applying. For example, if we're talking about capacity building programs or even new policies, etc., we need, of course, to mainstream this into action. So it would identify what would be the lessons learned. So afterwards, the outcome would be, of course, integration between the environmental dimensions in real manner, in reality, within other development sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamir, for sharing these points on behalf of our co-chair, Egypt. Now we will start the discussion on our third and final section of today's discussion. And this discussion is, as we heard about, we talked about finance, we talked about governance and institutions, and now we are looking at collaborative action. And again, I would like to invite the discussion to be focused on accelerating action with speed and scale, but very concrete ideas that, okay, what do we need to accelerate action and what type of partnerships, collective action, and strengthened cooperation we need. I have the honor again to invite Ambassador Mohammed Nasr first to frame the discussion, and then I will ask Anika to probably share to that framing discussion before we go to the open discussions and feedback. So Ambassador Nasr, it's over to you, or is it Mustafa who is now?
Thank you, Assad. It's Mustafa. I'm speaking on behalf of Ambassador Nasr this time again. Well, not to waste any more time. Partnerships are needed. Partnerships are already in existence, but more is needed in order to, if we are to advance on a pathway. There are already existing models where youth groups, women groups, indigenous and local populations are small and medium enterprises, large enterprises, multinationals, whatever the group is. There are already existing models where these groups are giving input both to policy and actual programs and projects on the ground that advance on the pathway to the future. And here I'm using the pathway to the future because a green transformation is the pathway to the future. The most important thing that we need to think about is when we discuss further partnerships, when we discuss more action, what is the format? How do we make sure that these partnerships are all inclusive? That how can we make sure that these partnerships do and will maintain the ideas established, that no one gets left behind, that one single approach is not fit for all problems and not fit for all countries and not fit for all communities, that there should be consensus rather than divides. These are the questions that partnerships and proposed partnerships need to answer, as well as provide solutions for the future. I don't want to take much more time, and I would like to hear Anika's interventions on that. Maybe before I log out on that. Well, I mean, let's get back to Anika and hear her ideas, and
thank you.
That's my 50 cents.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you. And we will be coming back to Egypt anyway during the discussions. And Anika, over to you.
Very briefly, of course, we talked about the need for integrated approach and collaboration between different sectors and strategies and all that. But the global crisis also requires a shared global response and a renewed multilateral system that is coherent, is coordinated and comprehensive in its response to new threats and challenges. And of course, we talk about multilateralism that is more important than ever. And of course, all actors need to find their place in a global system, work together in collaboration with others to provide new ideas, commit to a shared responsibility, and so forth. Mustafa talked about the importance of partnerships. I can echo that, but I think that we also need a positive narrative for sustainable future, so that we are not prisoners of former narratives or former positions. And I think the Stockholm +50 meeting and the process prior to it provides really a great opportunity for all of us to find a new joint positive narrative for sustainable development that can bring us forward. And I hope that we all think positive now in our interventions. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have partnerships. We need to work closer. We need to break silos, and we need to accelerate action. With this, then I will invite now the participants to share your ideas. What type of partnerships, collective action, and strengthened cooperation is needed to, and I'll focus on this, on accelerating action at a scale. So may I now invite Mr. Borjan Fonden from Sweden to take the floor, and be very brief if you can, less than 2 minutes, possibly because we are running a bit late. And then Yunus Arkan. Mr. Borjan, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished friends and colleagues, my name is Björn Fondén and I'm speaking on behalf of the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat, co-hosts and co-chairs for organizing this session in a way which truly speaks to the theme we're discussing here today on digitalization, inclusion and sustainable partnerships. However, whilst the youth of today are the most connected, most knowledgeable and largest generation of youth ever, we still face significant marginalization and barriers for participation, including the lack of stable internet access at home for 2/3 of the world's young people, and more than 2 billion youth below 25 without access to online communities and learning, which hinders sustainable development and especially has had a catastrophic impact during the last years of the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, we call for the immediate scaling up of financing, capacity building, support and inclusion of youth, and urge governments here today to bring forward concrete plans and programs to Stockholm Plus 50, noting that $1 invested in young people today will generate 1,000 times leverage on returns. Finally, we also urge all governments to put strict corporate regulation in place to prohibit environmentally destructive products and practices, putting a price on all social and environmental externalities, and fostering sustainable consumption and production inside our planetary boundaries, acknowledging that many wealthy nations and people must substantially and immediately reduce their consumption of unnecessary and unsustainable goods to allow for developing nations to fulfill their needs, which is key to ensure a just and fair transition. Because if you, the current leaders, do not act on these problems and provide adequate support to young people today, how do you expect us to solve these issues tomorrow when it's already too late? We don't have time to wait, and Stockholm Plus 50 needs to be an inflection point. We in the Youth Task Force look forward to engaging with all of you and expect your full support in the months ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I go to Yunus Arkan, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great pleasure to join this. My name is Yunus Arkan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. We're a global network of cities, towns, regions across 120 countries, and we promote sustainable development at all levels, and that's my emphasis. Of course, the discussion also connects to global governance and finance, but when it comes to collaboration, local and regional governments have become much more important player. You may recall that we are now in an urban world, which is much different than 50 years ago in Stockholm. Conference was convened 50 years ago.
Yes.
So they have seriously capacities built. They have serious opportunities of interconnectedness. This was very well demonstrated during pandemic, the way local governments can contribute to the global efforts, as well as in climate action and biodiversity. And finally, in the our common agenda of UN Secretary General, there is a strong emphasis for multi-level collaboration. So we hope Stockholm Plus 50 could be bringing these ideas into the space, and especially both the power of urbanization and the local and regional governments as actors into the space, into this global efforts, much visibly in the discussions. We would be very happy if the discussion paper can be improved. And on the way towards Stockholm Plus 50, we would be eager to explore new opportunities of a new momentum for multi-level action as the beacon of hope for the global emergency that we're facing on. And I thank you for your opportunity, and I'm interested to see the further follow-up of this process.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for bringing the attention to the local government. I would now like to invite and give the mic to Anna Barrera and then Philip Victoria. So Anna, the floor and mic is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the floor. And I must say that my intervention was more about the section 2, but in any case, this leadership dialogue is of a horizontal nature, given the topics which addresses. And they are essential to enable the achievement of sustainable development goals. Last week, the political declaration at UNEP 50 has stressed the need to enhance implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development. And governance and institutional setting, which is very linked to law, are part of the question of sustainable development. In fact, for this third section, law plays also a very key role. And we have many international environmentally agreed commitments since Stockholm, but these texts have not been as effective as expected. There is a deficit in implementation. And there is a lot of links between multilateral environmental agreements and SDGs, and not only the environmental SDGs. So for that, to improve the implementation, and then we will make a good improvement for this dialogue, is the strong governance and rule of law at the international and national levels. And we need the recognition of the right to a healthy environment, which has to be guaranteed, access rights included in Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration, and we need a strong administrations and well-trained judges. And in addition, we need to fulfill the commitments under multilateral environmental agreements, and we need to improve the governance settings of MIAs. And for this, the compliance committees of these MIAs plays a very important role, and it has to be open to the public intervention. And this is something that we would like to propose, to open public participation to multilateral environmental agreements compliance committees. We have proposed a side event, and we will have more opportunities to develop on this if our side event is accepted. Thank you very much.
And you can share more information about the side event on different websites, including Stockholm Plus 50. And now I would like to invite Philip Victoria from Ocean Conservancy. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the chairs of Finland and Egypt for convening this important meeting. Chair, I completely agree that to carry out collective action with a positive narrative, building solid partnerships and advancing governance and institutional arrangements, we have a unique opportunity with the legally binding instrument recently approved in Nairobi after the conclusion of UNIA 5 meeting. In this sense, the leadership of the member states will be able to carry out concrete and specific practices to break the silos, bring everyone in togetherness, and develop an international process that can actually tackle many of the problems here discussed through an effective and collaborative approach. And in this sense, let's not look so much at future actions in a very non-tangent way, but actually let's get to work in a very specific instrument that can solve many of the development challenges that we are facing in a very short term. We have this opportunity as it is set to be negotiated by the end of 2024. And through events like these, breaking the silos, bringing together all civil society, private sector, NGOs, working with member states, and under the impressive leadership of Finland and Egypt, we can definitely advance this collective action together and accelerate the SDGs implementation. Thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are at 2:59 in Geneva. That's exactly the time when we should start the wrap-up session for today's discussion. And with apologies to so many of you who wanted to take floor, but time did not allow. But as we said, that there is an opportunity to send your written inputs in 3 different ways: through chats, through the Google Forms, and through the community space, for which the links were shared in the chat and can be shared again. May I now invite the co-chairs to come in and provide their concluding reflections on today's discussion. So should we start with Ambassador Nasser, if you are there, or Mira, will you be providing, or Mustafa be providing concluding remarks?
Thank you, Asad. And on behalf of Ambassador Nasser, he's really apologizing for had to leave, but on his behalf. First of all, thank you all for all this fruitful and very, very rich discussion. It's it was very enlightening for us, a lot of ideas. And actually, I wasn't expecting to be that overwhelming for all the summary and for the key issues that have been raised, and also the concrete recommendation for action. I think this could be an important base for us to take it from now and build on it until the Stockholm +50 conference in June. I think we have a lot to build on it and work on it to really reflect it, because at the end, we need to hear implementation. We need to hear concrete idea on the ground, not only some statement and idea that people will forget it. We need action on the ground. For us as the COP27, we call it the year for implementation, and we would like to see it too in Stockholm, and to take it further to Sharm el-Sheikh. To wrap up, I think I think there is a widespread recognition that the climate finance and the climate action need to be scaled up from all the current levels. And still, there is a lot of gaps on how we can efficiently and effectively mobilize it further, and to meet the need of all countries, specifically the developing country. Again, I'd like to refer to the Ipcc report, the latest one. I think this is for us a big highlight that we want to build on it, because as we discussed, the nature-based solution and based on science, this is, I think, the way forward in the future. Inclusiveness and of all stakeholders, important of having the voice of the youth, of all the local, of indigenous people. This is also an important message that we want to take it to our conference in Stockholm. When we talk about the partnership, we all agree that it's one solution fits all approach cannot be applied. We need more creativity, but we need to include everybody on board. I think in the end we need to build consensus between us rather to having more divides. And the end, I know it's been a very rich discussion and a lot of summary. I think that we need to improve access for all stakeholders. Again, I think this is the main take. I think we need to build on it from now on.
Thank you.
And we take a lot of idea to the next working group, and I think this is, will be a lot of work we have to do together, and to take all this idea, this old proposal to the next working group and see how we can further develop it. And because government cannot work alone, we need all stakeholders on board with us. I think I'll stop from here and give it to Anika to complete it. Thank you.
Yes, Anika, please.
Thank you. This is definitely a mission impossible, but let's try. So the key issues that were raised also, we need meaningful engagement with youth in all policy processes at all government levels. And it was also mentioned that governments should also protect activists and strengthen institutions working on environmental protection to address the triple planetary crisis. Accelerating means of implementation would require an acknowledgement of the interlinked challenges and opportunities of sustainable development and a systems approach to designing and taking action. And to achieve balanced and inclusive growth, we need more green and more global development with new rules, with new values of harmony and green economy to address the triple planetary crisis. We would need to include youth in shaping education and representation, including through interactive hubs, for instance, Sustainable consumption and production was mentioned several times, and it offers the most direct pathway to acceleration progress towards the SDGs. And we need to strengthen its enablers and improve access to better statistics and data to empower decentralized action and safeguard both public health and address climate change. We need proper and explicit references to an integration of human rights and a right-based approach that is crucial for underpinning action on environmental sustainability that is also fair and inclusive. We have to be careful and thoughtful to ensure the job creation, economic growth, and sustainable development potential of environmental policy, that it is fully realized. We need scaled up deployment of clean energy, and we should explore all innovative ideas, but in a manner that is respectful and considerate the unique domestic context in all countries. We also have to ensure that any technological progress is fairly shared and no one is left behind. And then it was also mentioned that increase in fossil fuel production and consumption threatens the achievement of the SDGs and Paris Agreement implementation, but current trends go against the scientific recommendations. We need to phase out fossil fuels, but we must also be cognizant of the vulnerability of many to any transition and design compensatory policies and communications, if the intention is to have policies that have broad societal buy-in and endure for the long term. There were several concrete recommendations, calls to make education on sustainable development more widespread and perhaps even mandatory. We should focus more on indicators beyond growth. There were calls to ensure systemic approach with intergovernmental collaboration and multi-stakeholder engagement. We heard suggestions also on perhaps organizing another world conference on financing and ensuring the alignment of the global financial system and international financial institutions with the UN Charter. So these were some points that we could pick up from the rich discussion. Thank you.
Excellent summary, Annika. And thank you so much for bringing the whole discussion together. I would now like to go to the co-hosts, if they would like to share their reflections of today's discussion. May I first go to Dr. Ayub, if you are able to join and unmute.
Thank you, moderator. I wish to thank all the speakers for the good insights. It is true that the three strands of discussion are critical. They are some of the enablers in the journey that we have come since 1972. The issue of finance, governance, partnerships have been critical all along, and they will continue to be critical. And therefore, this engagement and the meeting ahead of us and all the input that we will continue putting along the way is very important, even as we make plans for the next phases of engagement through the various conventions, through the various engagements that the multilateral engagements we will have agreed upon. I look forward to very fruitful discussions as we go ahead with the preparation for Stockholm at 50. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ayub, providing these comments on behalf of co-host Kenya. May I now go to Cecilia?
Yes, thanks.
Co-host Sweden. Yes.
Yes, thanks, Assad, and thanks to everyone. And I can only echo what Miranda and Annika has expressed, that we've really had a very rich, interesting discussion. So thanks to everyone participating for your valuable insights. and contributions to shaping the content of Leadership Dialogue 3. Very much look forward to how this informal working group will continue to frame action-oriented recommendations and sharpen the outcomes of Stockholm Plus 50. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. I wanted to check if, Stephen, you would like to come in to explain the next steps, where we go from here today.
Thank you very much, Assad. Assad, you've done a wonderful job of narrating and moderating a very lively discussion here and also in the chat box. You've had so many excellent ideas. And Annika, I think you summarized them very well in Miranda's. You did as well. So very, very tough to bring that all together. From the side of the UN team that's supporting Stockholm Plus 50, we will work with our UN agency partners beyond UNEP as well to bring these comments into the background paper. I put the link into the chat box, Assad, and that is still open for comment. So your comments from the chat box, from the questions are still very valuable to us as we revise under the guidance of our co-chairs and our co-hosts, and we will aim to get a revised version up by the middle of next week. So March 15th, 16th, 17th, well in advance of the March 28th preparatory meetings when these background documents get formally tabled, again, for you and for all countries to feed into. So I think that would be it from me. It's been a very rich discussion, and I'm very grateful for all of the inputs and to our co-chairs for their guiding the discussion, and to our co-hosts for keeping us all moving in the right direction. Thank you, Assad. Back to you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all the participants, the co-chairs, the co-hosts, the contributors for co-creating today's very lively and rich discussion. We have a way forward, so your inputs will be included. Every of your input that you provided through chat or Google Forms or through the Green Forum will be informing the revision of the background document, number one. Number two, you heard that on 28th of March, there is a preparatory meeting that will happen, and probably there will be more rounds of discussion in which we will be consulting you. The two messages that I heard very loud and clear, and of course, the message on partnerships working together to create governance and institutions which can de-risk financing seems to be the narrative. And partnerships are close to my heart. I personally am supporting two partnerships, as you may all know, on PAGE and on GGKP. But the second message was, I think that's very clear, that we cannot separate the economic, environmental, and social crises or challenges we are facing. They are somehow interlinked and very closely interlinked. We need a solution which helps us to tackle the economic challenges of unemployment, inequality, and stagnated growth, together with the triple planetary crisis of nature, pollution, and climate. And for that one, I think we will create a really good plan of action which will accelerate the means of implementation, and that hopefully many of those recommendations will come out at Stockholm Plus 50 on 2nd and 3rd of June, if I'm correct. The last message which I heard, which was the message of hope, I think it came from Owen. We can do it. We have done it in the past. He referred to the example of the financial crisis, but look at the example that have been in human history before. So yes, it's possible, and we will do it. So with these, I would like to conclude today's session, and I look forward to staying engaged with all of you over the coming weeks and months, and possibly in a post-Stockholm Plus 50 era. So thank you so much for joining. Wish you all a very nice day and nice afternoon and evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.